today I'll be talking about Native American legislative acts. Does anyone know of any acts? Has anyone learned about them? What inspired me was, I took a tribal government class for business. I took it last semester and I really liked it. I'll start with the quote. Russell Means, he's part of the AIM. His quote said, "Before I was 6 years old, my grandparents and my mother had taught me that if all the green things that grow were taken from the earth, there could be no life. If all the four-legged creatures were taken from the earth, there could be no life. If all the winged creatures were taken from the earth, there could be no life. If all our relatives who crawl and swim and live within the earth were taken away, there could be no life. But if all the human beings were taken away, life on earth would flourish. This is how insignificant we are." He passed away in 2012. So the three legislative acts we'll be talking about today is the Dawes Act of 1887 and the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. American Indian Religious Act Freedom Act of 1978. And I like to learn visually, so I have some pictures on here. So why this topic? It was a legal way of gaining control over tribes by converting natives into society. It also forced tribes to give up land, identity, culture, and sovereignty. And they all had a huge impact on tribes. So the first one, the Dawes Act, the date that they signed this was February 8th, 1887, and the purpose was to force tribes onto reservations by splitting up sections to each enrolled member. The impact was the remainder of the land either got sold or it got leased, and they lost 90 million acres of land. 2/3 of it were sold and leased. 1/8 of an allotment was granted to single persons and orphans, which are children without parents. They were granted 1/8 of a section. Born or unborn children under the age of 18 with parents were provided with 1/16 of a section. The act was passed, and the government delivered supplies, food, and payments directly to individuals, ignoring tribal councils. According to Sharon O'Brien, by 1934, the government had allotted more than 100 reservations, and tribes lost 90 million acres. 60 million of those acres were sold to non-natives. The reservations of the land were dry, resulting in inadequate farming. Eventually, the tribes couldn't compete with huge tractors, and they sold their land. The second one is the Indian Citizenship Act. It was signed on June 2nd, 1924. The purpose was to bring tribes into mainstream society by passing a law that granted citizenship to the U.S. And their impact, it forced tribes to become citizens, or they weren't allowed to vote. And one important thing about the Indian Citizenship Act is the Merriam Report. So the Merriam Report of 1928 revealed proof of tribes filled with poverty, suffering, and discontent. Indians suffered from disease and malnutrition, had a life expectancy of only 40 years old, and the average income was only $100. The report recommended that the government build on native values rather than destroy them. And moving forward, two conclusions from the report stated that the BIA was inadequately meeting the needs of tribes and mismanagement of individuals' own affairs. I just wanted to put out there, also the purpose of BIA, the reason why they created it is because the U.S. government government looked at Native Americans as they needed to be babysat, whatever. So they created the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the ones that were in charge of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they were uneducated and they had no like experience of working with natives. But that was the purpose of the BIA being formed. And the last one, American Indian Religious Freedom Act. The date, August 11, 1978. The purpose, allow tribes to practice their religion and their culture, and the impact, tribes could now take control of sacred sites and objects. And the outcome is that it provided minimal assistance to tribes. So, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act gave Native people the right to practice their culture without consequence. To be more specific, according to Carol Barrett, the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act in August 1978 formally allowed Indian tribes the freedom to practice religion. This also gave tribes to regain access to sacred lands and sites of the country. ERFA also provided acceptance of traditional ceremonies for tribes across the country. For example, natives were now able to keep an eagle feather in possession. This is something that the public needs to be informed about due to the unawareness, because this is real history that is undocumented in education systems. As a result of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, the law provided minimal assistance to reassuring tribes that it was safe to practice their religion. Very few federal agencies changed their regulations to protect tribes in their First Amendment. So in conclusion, the main purpose of all these acts were to convert tribes into mainstream society. The main acts were just, I picked these acts because Dawes Act was in the 1887. It was like their first try at like trying to conquer Native peoples, and the Indian Citizenship Act gave tribes the right to be considered citizens of the U.S. And the reason why I picked these three is because of what's going on, and I know it's not good to be like political in this moment, but I'm not a political person either, but it's really important for all of us to know these. And I just hope you guys learned something, and thank you for listening.